Welcome to the second video in a 6-part series covering all the Mortal Kombat 1 characters that were available during the beta. First, if you're new here, I'd like to encourage you to head on below and drop a like and a sub, as it does allow me to gauge how much you guys enjoy these types of video and whether I should be making more of them. I'll also provide a link above to a playlist of all the character tower overviews that I'm making for all the Mortal Kombat 1 playable characters come the full release. But now, with the channel stuff out the way, it's time to cover our MK Uno stuff. Today, as you can see, I'm covering Kenshi, one of the most changed characters in MK history in terms of gameplay style. In MK9, Kenshi was probably one of the strongest zoning characters with quite a strong up-close game as well. Probably why he was widely considered #1 in people's tier list, because he was just uncontestable with that level of zoning he could do. In MKX, he was still quite strong depending on the variation chosen and what patch you were playing on, but still very viable. He gave MK11 a miss, both playable and even story-wise for some reason, but he came back and in all of his glory for MK1, and oh boy, he used that hiatus to come back stronger than ever, and the most changed, as I can recall, in all of Mortal Kombat history. Kenshi has undertaken an entirely new archetype, even new for NRS as a whole, or at least to my knowledge, as he is their first ever puppet archetype. For those who are unaware of what a puppet archetype is, it is an intensely complicated character type that has you in control of two characters simultaneously. Which, you could imagine, is a very difficult thing to pull off well, but oh man, when it goes well, it goes hard. If you need an example, I'll once again link you above to pro player Sonic Fox and just how he's figured out this character and created some mean combos and brutal B&Bs with him, some even meterless. This archetype creates a bit of an entry barrier and would not be advised for newer players to undertake unless you're willing to put in the time and effort into the lab to understand timing and combo variations and just what works as a whole for this character. As you can see, without a lab, I'm not the most confident character to do what is required to be any way decent with him, let alone be good at him. You'll be seeing a cut down version of this video that omits all the losses for the sake of time, but there were definitely a lot of losses through this video. However, this character, when properly understood and played, can be crushingly offensive, and a character that requires good timing and combo knowledge to even break free from the jailing that the Sento Spirit can enforce. Now, the Sento Spirit, or Sento Stance as it's called in this game. This is a fundamental component to Kenshi's kit that makes him such a threat, but it can also be one of his greatest weaknesses. We're going to start off with the strengths and then we'll move to the weaknesses, and finally I'll finish off with how I personally feel about Kenshi's character in the new era. Kenshi's strength lies in the puppet. It creates tons of extensions for his combo that can push him into even low 40% damage combos without a single use of meter, which in turn means that could be used for dishing out damage, and the moment that your opponent gets their turn to punish, you'll just have the meter to break out and reset into the neutral game. This puppet spawns in when you use a special move, Sento Stance, which toggles you between two move lists. That's right, two move lists. So not only do you have to learn and remember one set of moves, but you actually have to remember 3. Wait, what? 3? You just said 2. Well, actually, what happens is that Kenshi will have his primary moveset that you use when you begin your match, or toggle Sento Stance off. That is his default. Then when you toggle Sento Stance on, it will change your move list on Kenshi, as well as giving you an entire move list for the puppet as well. These moves from the puppet will act out as you press buttons for Kenshi to attack. This, thankfully, can be avoided by holding down the trigger. Pretty sure it is the stance switch one, whilst pressing any of your attack buttons to avoid the puppet from acting at the same time. This can be critical to some higher damaging combos, as the puppet helps extend out attacks and has some low and launching attacks that will need to be pressed at a counter-synchronous time as to Kenshi's buttons. The puppet can also help extend out Kenshi's range, as it can move independently from Kenshi to even be on the other side of the screen if the situation allows for it. This will then allow the player to press buttons for the puppet to attack, even when entirely out of the standard range of Kenshi's moves. This can be rather annoying and add a lot of pressure to the opponent to consider. Thankfully though, if the puppet or Kenshi is hit by any move, the puppet will have to kneel down and recompose for a moment from the absolute shame of being hit in any capacity, before standing up again and being fully functional. The puppet also has a time limit on its existence before it decides that it was better off in the afterlife and dissipates from this mortal realm. It can later be recalled by re-entering Sento's stance again. However, you may have noted that I said the puppet was on a timer rather than Sento stance. Which, if you did, bravo, gold star, that is correct. The puppet will disappear, but you'll still be in Sento stance with the associated moveset. That is more katana based and changes your specials over for ones that work with the puppet. You'll have to re-input the special if you want to return to the standard moveset with all of the spirit based specials. Alright, we've finally covered the basics. Let's go over what actually makes Kenshi strong. So, Kenshi actually has some good range in the neutral. His forward 2-2 string really helps you catch opponents at the range that you really wouldn't expect to catch them at. That paired with a combo that puts them into a stun off of, i.e. Frost's ground freeze, will allow you to follow up with a free chance to switch into Sento stance and carry on the combo and post-combo pressure. Another thing that is worth noting is that Kenshi is effectively has double the amount of special attacks than any other character in the game, as he has his initial set of specials that are a little more focused on what I believe is called the karma, like the soul push, the spirit drop, and the spirit push. Then you switch to Sento stance and you'll lose all of those previous specials, but gain a different set of them that allow you to interact with the puppet, such as recalling the puppet to where you're standing, as well as enhancing the active. If you enhance it, it extends the active timer. As well as a move that allows you to capture the opponent and do a dual attack with the puppet to knock them down. Now I'm going to be using this new point to highlight something that is both a strength and a weakness. Because Kenshi's highest skill power lies in using the puppet, it means that without Sento stance being active, Kenshi can become quite limited, and setting up a safe chance to switch into Sento can be a rather difficult task that may end up with you getting punished or wasting the Sento duration. It gives him such a high skill ceiling that becomes nearly impossible for any casual player to keep up with in any capacity, and I can definitely see this leading into plenty of quitalities, as people will simply not be willing to play against you. It's like using a meta powerful army in Warhammer 40k. No one's going to want to sit down and play against you unless they're masochistic. But on the flip side, if you have no idea what you're doing with Kenshi, you just pick him up because he looks cool, you'll probably get mopped and find him immensely frustrating, as you'll become confused trying to remember which inputs to do, and eventually button mash your way into Sento stance, to which the buttons have changed on you entirely. So the biggest factor against Kenshi is that he's not beginner friendly and heavily favors more experienced players that understand the mechanics of the game and are willing to put in the time to learn them, which is not entirely negative, as there is some high reward for taking the time to learn. But as a whole, I believe a lot of people will be turned away from Kenshi based on the sheer complexity of his archetype. As we're on to the negatives, it would be remiss of me not to mention how vulnerable Kenshi makes himself to start pushing for higher damage. A lot of his specials will leave him in a very negative state on block, or even some of his strings if followed through with. Some can be made safe with like soul push, or even lead into a punish if you hold it and stagger the release of the soul push. But you're playing with fire by doing that, because if your opponent learns that you're likely to hold it, then there will be seen as a gap, and that gap can be punished by an observant opponent. He also has some variation in the bass strings that allow you to change whether it ends in overhead or low, but because of this, it is balanced out by the fact that the last input of the string, there will be a gap of which that you can be punished. And not like armored reversal punch, just standard pressing a button that will potentially result in a full combo punish against you. So mixing up your strings with special cancels is a must for this character. A very prominent thing to talk about with Kenshi is cameos, and just how they will play out with him. Some of you must be thinking, damn man, Kenshi and the puppet and the cameos all against you at once, there's absolutely nothing you can do to beat that. That's egregious. To which I would agree, if that were the case. See, some of you keen-eyed might have already observed this, but once you're in Sento stance, the cameo meter begins to drain, where if you were to activate Sento stance at full, this would act as a timer for the puppet, and when it hits empty, the puppet would disappear. This also means that if you've used a cameo and a combo to set up a free Sento activation, you will not have the ability to use the cameo during the puppet's lifetime. I'd like to clarify that it's the existence of the puppet that actually drains the cameo meter and not being in Sento stance itself. Once the puppet disappears, the meter will begin to regenerate like normal despite being in Sento stance. If you prefer the moveset in Sento stance, you can do cameo based attacks in it. You're just going to have to be sacrificing 70% of your usable specials to do so. Now that's most of the gripes that I've had with Kenshi so far, or at least those that have lingered in my thoughts of this character. However, he's made a good impact on me personality-wise, as he has always been an awesome character, but he's awesome in a different way this time around. So previously, what we saw of Kenshi campaign-wise was in X, where he was this righteous martial artist and swordsman with a family gift of telepathy and kinesis with Sento, magnifying his abilities with the souls of his ancestors in it. He'd suffered a tragic loss of his wife, Suchin, at the hands of Red Dragon assassins, but not before having a child that he hucked over to his buddy Hanzo to train in the to become a Shirobari warrior, so they both eventually could go after and butcher all of the Red Dragon in revenge. So no, nice father-son bonding, some would say, in murder, but a overall positive story for our boy Kenshi. But get ready for some contrast now, as in the new era, Kenshi is a previous enforcer of the Yakuza. Yes, that Yakuza, the Japanese underbelly gangster Yakuza. Note that I said previous. He is now on the path of redemption, as his ancestors were honorable warriors of Japan, and Sento, the sword, was their family symbol. Now it was lost and the ancestors were decimated, and the remaining were forced to join the precursor group of that became the Yakuza. Kenshi wants to redeem himself for all the deplorable actions from his life in the Yakuza and restore honor to his family name, of which he must find and retrieve Sento as the first step to getting his family to follow him. I really like this approach, as I felt Kenshi was just kind of plopped into the MKX story, as people really gravitated towards him in MK9, but since he was a DLC character, he wasn't present in the story and they just had to incorporate him. They just kind of threw him in there and all the other characters act as if he's always been there. It just felt kind of off to me. This has Kenshi naturally fall into place as a character in the overarching story of MK1, as it turns out that Johnny Cage bought Sento as a mantelpiece decor. We also get to see how Kenshi was blinded. Kenshi in X was always blind. I know there was some lore behind it that you could dig for and find out, but the story makes no mention of it at all. And between story cutscenes we've seen in the gameplay and interactions, we will see and experience Kenshi going from fully sighted to Helen Keller within the duration of the campaign in MK Uno. Alrighty, man, that was a lot of talking and a lot of stumbling over my words. Overall, Kenshi looks like a super strong and specialized, high-skilled character with a fresh archetype to give us some change for our MK character dynamic within the gameplay of MK1. As for the new story for Kenshi, it is engaging and evolving, as I just want to know more about him, what he has done in the Yakuza Enforcer, and why he wishes to change the course of his and his family's life. As well as he's going to get blinded and develop further through the recovery and retraining as a blind swordsman with supernatural abilities that Sento only amplifies. Super cool, super fresh, ready for this game to come and lab the hell out of this character so I can test his true capabilities. If you're excited for MK Uno, ladies and gentlemen, drop a like. And if you're excited to get your hands on Kenshi, drop a sub. Show us some excitement down in the comments, or let me know which character you are most excited for down there too. Till the next tower, which is going to be Johnny Cage, ladies and gentlemen, take care. Have a good night or day wherever you're from. Be good people, and I will see you in the next one.